Hey there, guys. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt Wyatt, and today I'm going to review the new film called Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu that is written and directed by Jon Favreau. It's also co-written by Dave Filoni and Noah Clore. So basically, this movie is about the evil galactic empire who has fallen from the rebellion during Return of the Jedi, and the Imperial warlords have scattered across the galaxy. But the New Republic is trying to protect everything that they fought for, and they want to get information about the Imperial warlords and what they're up to, so they go and enlist the legendary Mandalorian Din Djarin and his apprentice Grogu himself. And I was one of the people that was not really looking forward to The Mandalorian Grogu because this is basically a continuation of the first 3 seasons of The Mandalorian show, and I'm someone who is a big fan of the show. I love the first 2 seasons. I remember when they first launched their first Star Wars content, when they were launching Disney Plus on their streaming platform, and they were releasing all the great catalogs at the time, and when that show came out, it became a hit, and it brought the fandom together when we were so divided since The Last Jedi during the sequel trilogy era. And Din Djarin became one of the most popular characters in the Star Wars universe. He basically became the John Wick in Star Wars. He was way more popular than Boba Fett. When he met up with Baby Yoda, who was named Grogu, that's where it all changed. And Grogu became a big selling marketing point and it became one of the best selling toys in the business, and he became adorable. We became attached to their relationship in the first 3 seasons, and I love the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. I thought the first 2 seasons were peak, but then the 3rd season went downhill for me, and I thought it was a big mistake to have, Din Djarin and Grogu reunite so soon when they got separated at the end of season 2, and you see them in the last 3 episodes reunited again in the Book of Boba Fett show. When Kathleen Kennedy announced that they were gonna do a Mandalorian Grogu, we were like, "Why are you trying to turn this as a continuation off of Disney Plus show and make this as your first Star Wars movie? Why would you do that?" Because there's gonna be a lot of people out there that have never watched the show, and it's gonna have to require a homework assignment. And when I watched the trailers, they look like they were putting multiple episodes and cram into one film, and it's gonna feel like more of a side quest. But I kept an open mind because I really love Jon Favreau as a director. He's the one that gave us the Iron Man movies, and I thought what he did with the first one was great. And yeah, he directed the remake of The Lion King of the animated film, and it did well at the box office, but it got very divisive of that movie, and I was one of the people that did not love it, and it was one of the most forgettable Disney remakes, in my opinion. But I still think he's a great director because I love what he did with the show of The Mandalorian. He was the showrunner of that show that worked alongside with Dave Filoni, which Dave Filoni is now is a co-CEO at Lucasfilm right now. But in the beginning, he was the guy who coming off of the Clone Wars series along with George Lucas, and he got in so much in deep with the lore of the Star Wars universe when he was working with George Lucas during the time of the making of the Clone Wars animated series. And when they did season 2, they brought a lot of the characters from Rebels and Clone Wars characters, and it was basically a fan service, but it was a fan service that was very serviceable and it was done well. And when Luke Skywalker showed up at the end of season 2, that just blew everybody's minds, and it was emotional when Din Djarin and Grogu got separated, but it was a big mistake for having the both of them reunited so quickly. I guess that having Din Djarin on his own was not gonna be a selling point in the later seasons, but it is what it is. I still accepted it that they reunited, but I thought that season 3 was my least favorite, and it became downhill, and I don't know why that they had to do a movie. But anyway, like, I wanna say this right now. I went to go see this movie. Before that, I saw the critic reviews, and it got very mixed response, which I kind of expected it was gonna be very mixed. But I went to see it with an open mind, and all I could say is that The Mandalorian Grogu was a decent film. But that being said, it still felt like a filler event side adventure that doesn't really add anything new to what we have already seen before. Now, look, I will say that the positives, the action set pieces and the fight scenes were peak. It was awesome, especially in the first 20 minutes of the movie was very dope. They deliver the fight sequences, the hand-to-hand combat, the gunshots. They were dope. It's kind of everything what Din Djarin, who he was, because he's so good at what he does on his mission by taking out the garbage. And the shots were beautifully well done. Cinematography was done very well, even though that some of the shots were done in the volume, which that's something that they've done in the first 3 seasons of the Mandalorian show, but it's on a bigger budget. but I still enjoyed the banter between him and Grogu. I mean, it never fails. If it still feels more of the same that you've already seen before, and it was great to see Sigourney Weaver, who is playing a colonel of the New Republic, who is also an X-wing pilot. That was the one that enlists Din Djarin and Grogu on this mission. But really, the whole Imperial warlords were not really that much of an important part of that movie. The important part of the antagonist was the Hutt's family, which is Jabba the Hutt's family. And you meet up with a Jabba the Hutt's son, which you've met him in the Clone Wars movie when he was a baby, but now he's a full grown adult, and he's been taken as a prisoner and been forced to fight in the gladiator match, and it's played by Jeremy Allen White, which you may have remembered him from Shameless and The Bear. And he's also been in the Springsteen movie, and I thought he was just going to be another side character that they had to go and rescue. And I will say that I thought he added a lot of gravitas to the role. He actually became a character. He was the type of character that didn't want to follow in his Jabba the Hutt, who is his father, following in his footsteps and following his legacy as a gangster. He wanted to be his own man and make a name for himself, and not be the guy who feared just because that who his father was. That we last saw him in Return of the Jedi. And I thought that Rada the Hutt was a really good character. I thought that the chemistry between him and Din Djarin and Grogu was good. But I will say that the antagonist of the Hutt family kind of felt very much of an afterthought and very generic. And the problem I had with it is that it did not feel like a movie to me. As much as I enjoyed some of the good stuff in the movie, but it felt like had multiple, like 5 or 6 episodes that was crammed into one, and you could totally see that in the editing process, that they had to cram this together, and there were times where they cut to black, and it felt like the scene itself felt like it was the end of the episode, and they had to jump into the next scene, and it felt like the beginning of the episode. But there were some couple of familiar faces, like Zeb, for instance. And in case you don't know who Zeb was, he's the character from Star Wars Rebels that we've grown attached to throughout that show, and he's in the movie. He's a supporting role, but I kind of wished he would have added more gravitas to the role between him and Din Djarin. He was only there to service the main character and nothing more. And the problem I have with this movie that I feel like they should have added a little bit more stakes to the main characters, especially Din Djarin. There were times in the movie, without giving away too much, that they do add stakes to him, and he was in real danger for the moment. But then at the end, towards the end of the movie, it felt like they pulled a 180 and it played itself safe, and it just really didn't really add any weight. But I will say, one of the positives that I really liked about this movie is that Grogu can actually step up and do his own thing when we see him on his own without Din Djarin, where he's going to be at the one to rescue him and save him for the first time he's ever done in his entire life, because he was the only one who has always been saved. Because now he's starting to mature a little bit more. For the most part, most of the time he acts all goofy and be all cute and all that we've seen many times before. But in the whole theme of this message of the movies, that when you're a little kid and you're raised by your father, you think that they're going to be around forever, but no, they won't. And you're gonna have to learn to do things on your own, and that's kind of what Grogu does. But with Grogu, he is one of the species of Yoda, and Yoda can live for 900 years. So basically, Grogu is very much older than he looks, even though he's a baby, but he's lived for a very long time. And there's gonna come a time where he's gonna outlive, well, Din Djarin, because he's gonna be living for centuries, and he's gonna have to learn to do things on his own without his help. They do touch on it for the moment, and it was cute, but I feel like they could have done more with it. Because when you're making a movie that is straight off of a TV show, you gotta do more. You gotta add stakes. You gotta add a little bit more gritty and add more weight to it, that it has a big impact. And you gotta have a main antagonist that is willing to challenge the protagonists themselves and not make them too indestructible, if that makes any sense. And they sort of did, but not really, because the main antagonist of the Hutts were very generic and forgettable. And there's also a bounty hunter that is hunting down Din Djarin, is the character Embo, which he is a character from the Clone Wars series, but most people are not going to know who this character is. He's another badass bounty hunter that is hunting him down, and the character doesn't have any dialogue, which I don't know if the character had any dialogue in the Clone Wars series. I'm gonna have to rewatch that show again. But you're not going to know much about this character. It's just a generic bounty hunter character that is hunting them down. Very badass, don't get me wrong. I mean, he was very tough to fight. And look, I'm fine with having a Star Wars that is a smaller scale story, that we don't have to have a story that is some evil galactic empires from now trying to take over the galaxy. We don't really need that. We just need a great character driven story. It does work for the majority of the part, but at the end of the day, overall, the film felt very much of a side quest, more of a Star Wars filler adventure that you're not gonna look back in the last 20 to 30 years or more, and it's not gonna be one of those, Star Wars movies that's gonna change your life, but it's definitely not one of the worst. It's not one of the worst Star Wars movie, but it's definitely not one of the best. It's not gonna be on the same level as the original trilogy or the prequels or the sequel trilogy, that type of matter. But I will say that it's still an enjoyable film that you can just go out and watch it in the theater and just go off into watching a filler adventure. And if you love Din Djarin and Grogu, you're gonna have a good time watching them together. But it's still not gonna add anything by the end of the movie. It's just gonna feel like, yep, it just feels like it's gonna be another filler episodes of the show that we see many times before. Here's another example for a movie that was done off of a TV show. There's a movie called Serenity, and this was a continuation off of the Firefly series that was done by Joss Whedon. But when Joss Whedon directed Serenity, it felt like a movie. It felt like the budget got higher and that you don't have to watch the show to know what's going on. You could jump right in it without getting lost. This movie, The Mandalorian Grogu, it felt like that you have to watch the first 3 seasons to get into their relationship between Din Djarin and Grogu. And and the whole main story was very thin. It's not gonna add anything that will impact the main characters. It just feel like it's gonna be just another filler adventure, and I feel like they could have done more, and they could have treat this as more of a culmination swan song to Din Djarin's character. They could have done that Logan style, but it seems to me that at the time when they were making this movie, it looked like they wanted to continue on with the characters, and they mentioned that they were gonna do season 4, but after The Mandalorian Grogu, and you're like, "Why the hell would you do that? That makes no sense. Then what was the point in making a movie?" Basically, you're just trying to turn this into a cash grab gimmick to get more people back into theaters and get back in the Star Wars universe, because for the last 7 years, they've been relying too much on Disney Plus content for Star Wars, and it was basically tarnishing the brand. But now that they've changed their strategy, now that Dave Filoni is now the co-CEO at Lucasfilm, and that they're gonna change directions for the Star Wars universe, hopefully that they have a great plan ahead. I hope for the best. I wanna hope for the next Star Wars projects. We got one more Star Wars movie that was under Kathleen Kennedy, and it's called Starfighter with Ryan Gosling, and it was directed by Sean Levy. We haven't seen anything yet. We only saw a couple of set photos, and it's gonna come out in a year, and I have more faith in that because they are actually making that into the movie, and I think that this Starfighter movie is gonna be the first Star Wars movie that feel like, "Oh my god, we're back in the cinema for Star Wars." But for The Mandalorian Grogu, I wouldn't say that this is gonna be the movie that will bring Star Wars back in the cinema. This is not one of them. I feel like they didn't need to make this into a movie. If you make this into a season 4 for, like, 6 or 7 episodes, I would've been okay with it. It would've been a good, decent season. But for as a movie, it's not gonna do anything. But I will still say, I wouldn't say you shouldn't see it, because if you're someone who's a fan of the show and you wanna see the continuation, this may be for you, but don't expect anything more out of it, because it's just gonna be, like, basically more of the same. But I'm gonna give this movie a 7 out of 10. That's a fair score. It's right now it's tracking 80 million on opening weekend, and it's a Memorial Day weekend, so it's a 4-day weekend for the box office numbers. And look, I hope it's successful. I hope it does decent. My prediction is that I think that this movie will make around at least 500 million and maybe more. It might make more, and I could be wrong, because I was actually at the theater and it was very packed. And at the end of the movie, when the credits started to roll, everybody in the theater was clapping. So there might be a little bit of hope for The Mandalorian Grogu that it might make money. And maybe if they're smart enough, they could turn this into a Mandalorian trilogy. They could turn this into a movie. And I hope to God that they don't do a season 4 of The Mandalorian. Please do not do that. If you want to continue on with the story with these two, I say do a trilogy. If the first movie does well, make this into a trilogy and also make it into a movie, and you got to do more. And they've already announced that they have bigger plans for Grogu. And I hope that they give us a little explanation to where he was during the sequel trilogy era, because you got to remember, he's going to be living throughout centuries, and he was nowhere to be mentioned throughout the sequel trilogy. So I hope they give us a little bit more answers somewhere down the line. But anyway, that's my thoughts on The Mandalorian Grogu. Let me know what you thought. Have you seen it? Did you like it or did you not like it? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you like this review, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Hit the like button. And if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification so you know when my videos are up. And if you're new to the channel, and in case you don't know, I have a second YouTube channel called Small Zero. I co-host alongside with Ryan Cam and 3D Jake. We cover everything in the world that goes around in movies, TV shows. We cover trailers and so on and so forth. We've been having a lot of guests on our show, and we're going to continue to do more. We usually do live on either Wednesdays or Fridays, and I also put out clips of the segments that we covered, so that way you could watch a certain segment that you don't if you don't feel like watching the whole thing. And some of the stuff are very edited. But anyway, if you want to follow my social media platforms like TikTok, Twitter, or Instagram, click the link tree in the description down below as well. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great day, great evening, wherever you're from, and stay tuned for more of my content.